everybody, I'm making soap today. Come and join me. Here are the ingredients that I'm using as well as the equipment. So let's get started. As you can see, I have my gloves to protect my hands. When you're working with lye, it can definitely be harsh when it comes in contact with your hands. It could cause irritation, it could cause redness. If it stays on there for a while, I'm sure it could cause even worse harm, maybe blistering. Here I'm adding my fragrances. I went with Litsea, myrrh, and tea tree essential oil, and it smells really good and refreshing. Now I'm measuring out my coconut oil. I added a little too much, so I'm putting a little bit back so I can get as precise measurements as I can get. All right, now the distilled water. One thing I forgot to explain before is when I put my glass bowl on the kitchen scale, I have to make sure that I zero it out so that the weight that I'm getting is the contents that I'm adding to the glass bowl and not the glass bowl itself. And again, I'm making sure that I get precise measurements. If I add a little too much water, I normally just pour it out. So this is my lye, y'all. You gotta be careful with this stuff. It's sodium hydroxide. It's for cold processed soap, which is what we're making. But you don't want to get it on your skin. You want to be very careful, which is why I'm using gloves. And for precaution, what you can do is have vinegar. Vinegar is going to help basically neutralize it if it were to get on your skin. Make sure you wipe, and wipe some more when you're dealing with those little tiny lye beads. You don't want to discover them later. So I'm pouring my lye into my water. Never pour the water into the lye is what I've learned from soap makers who have been doing it much longer than me. This time is pretty dangerous as well because of all the vapors that are coming up when the lye is introduced to the water. So you want to make sure you're standing back when you're incorporating this, and preferably wearing a mask. This is the vinegar I had on hand. Unfortunately, I had to use my good vinegar. This I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but this solution, take note of it, is really good when you're trying to find out if your soap is ready to use. So I basically took the glass bowl that the coconut oil was in, and I created a double boiler just to get it nice and melted before I add the lye water. Right now the lye water is a little too hot. I want to wait until the lye water and the coconut oil are similar in the temperature, and I want that to be between 120 and 130. So as you see, I'm checking it here. I'm gonna let it cool for a little bit longer, but while I'm doing that, I'll take some of my other additives and I'll go ahead and start crushing them. So these are my fruit skins that I tend to save. It's just something about the smell. I love to use them as homemade potpourri. I take pineapple skin, I take tangerine skin, I take banana peels, any type of fruit that I may have eaten, and I'll dry them out. I'll usually dehydrate them on the lowest setting in the oven, or I'll use my dehydrator, and I just get them until they're nice and completely dry and crisp. And you can, like I said, use these as potpourri, put them in hot boiling water and boil them and get a wonderful smell. As you see here, I'm crunching them up, getting them into tiny pieces, and I'm gonna add them as exfoliants in my soap. And my lye water and my coconut oil are within temperature. I'm now adding slowly the lye water into the coconut oil. I'm being careful not to splash too much. So I'm adding in my fragrance here. Again, I'm trying to stir lightly just to incorporate. I'm going to soon grab my stick blender, as you see here, and I'll get to blending. As you see, it incorporates a lot quicker And you see the physical reaction a lot sooner when you're using the stick blender. You can use a spatula or any spoon for that matter to incorporate, but it takes forever. So we're saving ourselves some time in that process here. Once we have mixed the combination of the oil and the lye together where it's thickened up, and I can run the stick blender around the top and you can see a line traced in the soap, that is when we're done blending. And I'm so glad I had my vinegar handy because as you can see I got a little on my arm there. But as soon as you pour the vinegar on, it almost immediately you feel the relief. Once it gets on your skin, the lye water or the soap, it has just a tingling feeling. It feels a little irritated, but when you go to pour the vinegar, it immediately goes away. All right, so we're coming along. It's getting a little thicker. We definitely have some ways to go. I tend to blend just before trace if I'm adding different ingredients. For instance, I have the hibiscus powder, I have the sea salt. I have a couple things where I don't want it to get too thick before separating the soap and adding in those additives. So that's what I'm doing here. In one bowl, I'm gonna add my activated charcoal. In the other, I'll add my hibiscus powder. In the big bowl, I'll add my crushed fruit skins. And I'm sorry, you guys, that I don't have everything covered in the camera's view. I really don't know what I was thinking. I think I was a little too focused on the soap and didn't realize that I didn't record some of me trying to add these ingredients together. But here is the hibiscus powder, and one thing I learned is it makes for a beautiful burgundy color when you add it into the soap. But once you blend it with the stick blender, you can forget about it keeping the color. It basically turns into an olive green. I would have liked for me to just use the spoon to incorporate it and just been able to keep that beautiful burgundy color that you see there. I'm okay with the earth tone that I ended up with. It just changed the color scheme for me a little bit. So now you can clearly see that the soap is at trace. When I take the spatula and you can see the lines left in the soap, then it's officially at trace, and that's when it's been incorporated enough and it's thick enough for you to really prepare to mold your soap. So if I had just kept it like that, it would have kept my color scheme that I was going for, which is the burgundy and black, but it's okay. I still like the earth tone. It definitely added a nice rustic, earthy look to the soap, which I still love. It's just not what I originally was going for. Another thing to notice is that I use the stick blender on the lighter color to incorporate that first before using it to blend the darker color. Because obviously if I'm working with other colors like yellows and blues and pinks or whatever color, that would make the difference in me trying to keep that color if I'm using the same stick blender. Another thing that I thought about is that it still would be important for me to use the stick blender to make sure that whatever that I'm adding into the soap is fully incorporated. So even if I just use the hibiscus powder and added it into the soap, maybe a hand whisk or something that would fully incorporate it into the soap where it wouldn't be any clumps, that's kind of important. All right, so you saw the soap in the big bowl just a few minutes ago, and as you can see, it's quickly thickening. That's why you have to work fast. I'm just gonna add in my crushed fruit skins as my exfoliants. I'm gonna get that incorporated. I'm gonna save just a few to drizzle on the top. And soon here I'll be putting everything into the soap mold. One thing you'll find is that as your soap continues to thicken, which it will, once it gets to trace, it quickly thickens up. It gets harder and harder to work with, especially when you're adding in dyes and colors and other things. So that's why I'm working quickly to get this put inside the mold. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to start with my white with the added exfoliants. I'm going to move this over here in a second so that you see a little bit better of what I'm doing. So stick with me here. I'm sorry. I did not have a good camera view at this point. What you see me doing here is tapping the soap mold just to get out any air bubbles. When it goes to dry and you see bubbles here and there, it's a little annoying. So to prevent that, you tap out the soap mold to try to burst those bubbles. I'll do that probably in between each layer. So with this, I just had an idea to do kind of a black top and kind of mix it a little bit. I'm kind of making this up as I go along, y'all. I'll end up swirling it, but as I notice, and I always do this, I never swirl enough. Like you'll see it at the end that it definitely is swirled, but I would have liked to get that wood skewer in there a little bit more, just to make a few more peaks and nice little whimsical swirls and things. I like what I did with the spoon there, but I probably should have went through and did it maybe 5 more times than what I actually did. I think what it is that when you're looking at it and it's still wet like that, it looks like it's so incorporated. And I guess it's not until it dries, like really is solid, where you are able to distinguish the different lines and the different swirls and the color. I think I'm always just afraid that I'm gonna end up with like one mesh and it's not going to have a distinction between the colors. I knew that when I did this and I still under swirled. We'll do better next time. Again, I'm gonna pounce that bad boy on the table to get rid of any air bubbles. And I'm glad I did that because I ended up not noticing any air bubbles. So that's definitely a good trick to use. So I'm adding my green earth color to the top with the hibiscus powder. And again, I'm pretty much making this up as I go along. I always have so many ideas when I look at what colors I want to use, and then when I get to this part, it's like so much to do. So I end up designing the top and then redesigning it and adding a few more swirls or whatever the case. But it's fun. Who cares? I enjoy doing it. Yes, and be careful not to mess your layers up by pouncing it too hard on the table. But I took that extra black that I had, and now I'm kind of just doing this two-tone top, if you will. You'll see that I use basically a plain wooden skewer to just get some line designs in there. But I'm scraping every ounce of that black. Yes, don't waste not one drop. Alright, and now I'm just gonna play around with the design a little bit and see how we can make it nice and pretty. I like these skewers for like details, especially when I'm designing the top. I noticed that it's not as good for when you're trying to get swirls within the soap though. I mean, not unless you were using several maybe attached to one another and it ends up being a multiple pronged stick where it can kind of grab a whole bunch at the same time and kind of swirl it. I don't know, but it's definitely good for like details at the top. So I'm gonna speed it up as I figure out what exactly I'm going for this top layer design. But you'll kind of see where I was getting at in a moment. All right, Hawaiian lava black sea salt with the 2 different colors. I'm gonna add that at the top as another exfoliant. It feels really good. It really does a good job of just scrubbing away that dead skin. All right, I'm gonna add my fruit skins on the other side.
Thanks so much for watching, you guys, but we're not done yet. Check out part 2 for the unmolding. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment.